video track. I believe this evening we're recording also a video track. Is that correct? So for those of you who like to see the sheen from the foreheads of some of us later on, the other tracks which are recorded audio, the first presentation involved the 30,000 foot level of the $100 million plan by both Mr. Kelly and Mr. Benders in regards to how the plan was going to be utilized, where it was going to go, what kind of loans were going to be accessed out it, and the three major components. The second presentation involved Mr. Rubino covering the way in which the monies were going to be bonded out, how they're going to be sold off in the early stages through the banks on a limited basis, and then ultimately rolled up potentially at some later date, a year, 2 years, as they roll up into the bonding to sell them off rather than selling them off in small piecemeals as we got started. And then last meeting, we had the early stages of the administration of the fund and how the fund itself is going to be brought forth, the steps and procedural steps. What came out of our committee from the last meeting was a desire to have more detail as we go dig deeper into how the fund would be accessed, what kind of loan portfolios would be put forth, who is going to be administering those, where the decision trees are going to be made, and then ultimately even questions concerning application process and the physical piece of paper. So with that, I'll turn it over the head of economic development for the county, Mr. Benders, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, committee. Larry Benders, Director of Development for the county. As the chairman said, this is a continuing conversation about the Economic Development Fund, which is an essential component of the Economic Development Plan that you have approved a few months ago. What we're going to cover tonight, as the chairman indicated, is objective and strategy and an approach. And then, importantly, we're going to introduce a concept to you called the standard process, which is how we think about deals today. Then we'll talk about the CCCIC as an aside and what our intent to do is relative to that organization. I'll share the launch calendar with you, which you asked about the last time. And then Greg Zuka will come up, followed by Laura Clark and Nate Kelly, each talking about some examples in each of their verticals about how we're doing this. An opportunity to talk to them, have a dialogue about how we look at each of these verticals and how they work. Then we'll come back for a summary.
For benefit of the audience, anachronisms, if you could just identify like the CICCI, things of that nature, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course. I said two jargony things already. CCCIC is the Cuyahoga County Community Improvement Corporation, Investment Corporation, which is a construct under the Ohio Revised Code that allows governmental bodies to basically have a third party create bonding capability. And then the other thing I said was vertical, and vertical is basically our nomenclature, our jargon for a subset of the fund and a focus area of the fund. So going forward, our objective is to continue to move this process toward the economic fund approval, and then to address the open questions and concerns that have come over the last few sessions with you. And I think we hopefully will cover all those things this evening. The strategy. Our strategy is to take our current internal and very linear process, which we call the plumbing, and take that process to scale. In other words, how do we attract an idea? How do we vet an idea? How do we look at it? And I'll show you that in a moment. And then walk you through the three of the programs in the fund with our staff this evening, and then share the process documents. In advance of this meeting, you received, I think electronically, I think you have in front of you, examples of application forms, evaluation forms, and other materials that our loan participants have to go through as they approach each of these funds. Okay, our approach. If you recall from the Economic Development Plan, an important component in the plan was that if we want to create and effect a local strategy, we need local funds. To date, the Department of Development has relied almost exclusively on federal funds. Federal funds are nice and helpful and essential. However, with the federal funds comes the federal requirements. And those requirements and outcomes may not comport with our own outcomes desired. Hence, we need local funds. A couple of recent projects that you've heard about, these did not come to this body, they went to the Board of Control. Fatheads Brewery, that was a brewery I think I mentioned last time that we, a Pittsburgh brewery located near the stadium in Pittsburgh, the football stadium. is locating here, is opening an operation here, and we used CDBG, Community Development Block Grant money, or federal money, to give to lead that $450,000 program for the job creation there. Stoneworks is another example. That's a Bedford Heights company, maker of tile and kitchen counters. They are expanding in Bedford Heights, and we used Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, or federal money to help them do the job retention and job creation. In those cases, we found federal money that could help us do what we needed to do, but that's not always the case. Hence the need for our own resources, local strategy, to affect a local funds for a local strategy. AmTrust comes to mind. 2 weeks ago, the announcement of the 800 jobs that will be created in downtown Cleveland. We'll be using the Vision Fund, or the Economic Development Fund, assuming that it's approved next year, to create that loan ability to drive that very important job creation program. The $3 million in that deal is more than our entire economic development budget in the general fund. So that's the scale. So this is really, really essential to have these local monies to do these projects. The graphic at the bottom of the page is a reminder of the fund and the three verticals. There's an innovation development channel, or vertical, consumer property reutilization channel, and business growth and attraction. And you'll hear about each of those from Laura, Greg, and Nate in just a few moments. The process. One thing that occurred to us after our last visit was we never spoke to you about how it is that we do our business every day. So this is what we do every day in economic development. So it's a very linear process that goes from beginning, has a middle and an end. And the beginning is you engage with partners, let's say someone who wants a loan. So you work with them, and they generate an application in the second step. So out of the process of engagement comes an application. Application comes to the Department of Development for review and analysis. Then, if it's okay with the staff in our department, then it gets referred to the CCCIC, the Cuyahoga County Community Improvement Corporation, Investment Corporation, for review and to make sure that the numbers work. So it's a third party that we've talked about. Then, if it clears that review, then it goes on to the appropriate approval body at the county, whether it's the county, the Contracts and Purchasing Board, or the Board of Control, or to the council, depending on the dollar value of the program. So a lot of work has gone into a program. It's been looked at by a third party, CCCIC, and then it comes to the appropriate county body for approval and review. Then the project, assuming it gets approved, it closes, the loans close, and the project is started. And then you get into a whole cycle of evaluation. The metrics, are they being done? Is the loan applicant compliant with all the terms and conditions? Are they paying their note, is what we do. Now you're going to see this standard process for each of the folks that comes up and how it applies to each of their verticals. You'll see it in property, you'll see it in innovation, and you'll see it in attraction. So this is the process. It's very linear. It's what we do every day. That's how we got Fatheads, Stoneworks, and all the other deals that we've done this year. So there is a process. And in your books are examples of the applications, the evaluation kinds of forms, the documents that we use to help us support this process along the way.
Yes, Mr. Brady?
I don't know. I don't want to be, interrupting but the brewery I read the story in the paper, and I think I got an email. The block grant funding that's used for that. I know block grant funding, has strings attached to it, and without getting into that, I don't want to distract you, but how did the CDBG funds work with that particular brewery loan?
Through the chair to the council person, a couple of ways. One, block grant, you have to demonstrate a low or a moderate income person is benefiting from the spending, or it's in a targeted area. In each of those cases, those are targeted areas, Middleburg Heights and Bedford Heights. So you're allowed to spend your block grant money in those areas.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Proceeding.
Any follow-up in regards to the question, Mr. Brady? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
As an aside, continuing, the Cuyahoga County Community Improvement Corporation had a lot of conversation about that last time. And if you recall, the committee made many suggestions to us about who should be on and how we should move forward with that organization. So in your books are the Commissioner's Resolution from 1982 that enacted the local CCCIC, the CICs, or the CCCIC for short, CIC, a summary of its purpose and what it does. And then what we'd like to do is come back next month as we get through this evening and the proceedings now and come back to you with a recommendation for how should we repopulate this CCCIC. Form will follow function. What do we need them to do? Then what are the skill sets that should be on that committee to help us do that? And we'd like to be thoughtful and come back and say, here's what our thoughts are about that organization. We heard a lot of conversation last time, and I think that's the reasonable approach is let us take a deep breath and say, here's what we think we should do with this organization. So with your approval, we'll come back to you in a month or so and show you what we propose for the CCCIC. But the CCCIC is up and running right now. There are bios of the existing members in your book right now. We go to it on an almost monthly basis right now to approve deals. So there's nothing urgent right now about the CCCIC, but we would like to come back and talk to you about what it should look like going forward in January.
Any questions in regards to that? I did notice in the CIC, as far as some of the requirements in there, that there was an element that talked about prevailing wage. Is that going to be something that comes over as an adoption in regards to a project or something that comes in the development section where there's brownfield or anything of that nature?
Mr. Chairman, do you mean relative to who will be on the CCCIC?
Excuse me?
Is your question relative to composition of the CCCIC?
No, it's in regards to the construction techniques. If we use that as our vehicle and deals flow through that, it indicated a need for prevailing wage if the deal is actually flowing through the CIC. Will our deals actually flow through or just be giving a thumbs up or down as far as the structure of the deal? The one being, it actually is a deal that actually the funds flow versus, is my understanding, and this is more of a review process?
Mr. Chairman, we will come back to you in January, talk about what we think the approval rights, responsibilities of the CCCIC will be in January specifically, and say, here's what we think they should do, here's what we think they are advisory.
Okay, please, if we can review that from the statutorial aspect as to whether or not a private business is going to be required to follow that as far as prevailing wage, or whether that's only strictly for government contracting in regards to it. Thank you.
So we'll come back in January. Thank you. The launch calendar. One of the other things we heard last time was, as the chairman said, you have 11 products. Are you really think you can launch 11 products at once? And we don't think we're going to need to launch 11 products at once, nor should we. So what you've got here is called the launch calendar. The council meeting dates in 2012, about every 6 weeks or apart or so. And then in the first flight, early January, our plan is to launch 5 products: the pre-seed fund, the modernization fund, site expansion, redevelopment ready, and large-scale attraction. And the colors will mean something you'll see later, that there's some color and order to all this. So you see there are 5 funds in January in the first flight, because that is really what we are doing right now. These are the programs that we are currently running on a regular basis. We're familiar with them. They're up and running as we speak. So then we'd come back in about 6 weeks, mid-February or so, and come back with another 2 products to launch in the business growth and attraction. Then the third flight will be in mid-March or so, when another product will launch, which is micro-enterprise. And then the last 3 products in the fourth flight, if you will, in April will launch. And you notice that in January 24, you see the RFP under micro-enterprise. That recognizes the fact that we will RFP or request bids to proposals to run our micro-enterprise program. We don't expect, to Councilman, to your question a few times about micro-enterprise, we don't have the capacity to handle hundreds of phone calls for people trying to start businesses. That will be the job of whoever responds to the bid. So we recognize that that's a capacity issue that we don't have, nor should we do. So that's how we'll do it. But the RFP will have to be bid, set out, and then responded to. So that's why it'll be 3 or 4, a couple of months later before we can actually have a partner identified. So we were listening to what you were saying and have responded with this process. So the flights are scheduled. So 5 products upon approval in January, then a couple of products 6 weeks later, then some more products as we get experience and move along the time, and we get better at executing these programs. That's the launch calendar. So we're flighting it and not doing it all at once.
Mr. Chairman, Can I make a point just real quick? Just
Sure.
that I got some clarity from Mr. Kelly about that. I just thought the council might want to know when it comes to this is kind of going back a slide or two, I guess, but in terms of this process with the CCC, IC, those board appointments, my understanding is have neither a expiration date or any other restriction on them. So as we decide, and with consultation, I would think with council about what types of expertise we want to have on there, we can retain people on that board, we can take people off the board, we can move that around as we see fit, and that's something that I've heard repeatedly from the community, and I've repeated several times, is that we want to make sure that in some point along that process that we have outside experts with a lot of specific knowledge in different fields that we think make sense. Now, some of those people may be a good fit, some of them may not, but it's been really an underutilized board that really hasn't been an empowered board either, I would say. I don't think they've ever said no to some people may not think that's a bad thing, but I don't think they've ever said no to a project. And I think it's an opportunity for us to really engage some true business leaders. Now, sometimes it's hard to get a CEO, let's say, on a board because CEOs have a lot of other responsibilities, and I've heard people say sometimes the best person to have on board like that is not a CEO because they barely have the time to really delve into the projects. But that's something where hopefully when Larry's talking about coming back to you in January, I mean, we've had some discussions with some folks that might be interested in it, but that would be something I would think the council would also want to be engaged in. So sometimes we have holdover board members that we have to wait a year or two or three before their board terms are over. But that would not be the case with this particular board. I just want to make sure the council knew that. I'm sorry to interrupt the flow of your
No,
presentation.
and I think that as I saw, the only statutory requirement is that there has to be, I believe, 2/5 have to come from political organizations. I think from a structural standpoint, there's no limitation other than it can't go below that number. So I think currently we're running with 5 out of 11, which if you do the math, that comes out to 40.002 or something. So we just get into that 2/5 with the current number. But I think that there was some discussion about changing the makeup, and this being truly a county board, that the idea of bringing in maybe east side, west side, doing things maybe that would shake things up a little bit and be of a different nature. So I think it'd be kind of interesting.
And if I could put a button on this, Mr. Chairman, we're doing this in the right order. We're trying to figure out what the fund is, what does it do, how should it work. Then you can say, here's what we need on the CCCIC for us to be efficient and effective. So we're doing this in the right order.
Do you anticipate that if an item were to come forward sometime after passage, but before, would it come before we would have the opportunity to look at reconfiguring the CIC? So that the current CIC might be the officiating body for any proposals that might come before it, or is it that we'll have enough of a window of time to reconstruct the board if we need to?
Mr. Chairman, that will depend on how quickly we can move and identify who's on the CIC, the new CCIC, and get them seated. What I will remind you, though, is there's another approval body, whether it's a board of control, contracts purchasing board, or the council. Any deal has to go to some other body for approval. We cannot approve deals in the development department. There's another up or down body, depending on the size of the deal. That's driven by the purchasing ordinance. So there's always another look. With that, launch calendar. I'd like to turn over to Greg Zuka, who will take you through some of the innovation programs and the work we've been doing, and I'll be back at the end. Thank you.
And again, just for everybody to be following along, the innovation is that first set of bars that sits on the top of there, just to map it up. And it also maps up with the 3 main bars that you saw from about 2 weeks ago, where we had the main functions. Again, the innovation was the one to the far left. It's just so we can try and make sure everybody's is following along. And they will be consistent, I believe, all the way through the presentation, Greg? Thank you.
Good evening. Again, my name is Greg Zuka from the Department of Development. So just to pick up on where some of the themes that Larry was touching base on. So part of our local strategy is an effort to also support local businesses and help them grow and thrive, and helping to grow our own businesses, be more organic and not just focus always on attraction, but also helping our existing businesses and entrepreneurs locally to grow and thrive. What we're trying to do is develop the region's innovative capacity, and to make sure that as we have fledgling businesses here in our county, that we have the resources available to help them grow and thrive. So this graphic right here kind of is a capital continuum for the various stages of innovative firms, which kind of is a flow chart which also shows where we're going to be targeting our 4 investment programs within the innovation vertical. So the first program is the Innovation Match Program. And this is going to be, in a sense, a grant opportunity, a matching grant program for basic research and development. So that will be at the far left of the graph. These are ideas, basic research and development opportunities that will come along where it's either a federal government RFP or a state RFP to establish a research center of excellence. Some recent examples was the NASA put out an RFP for the establishment of a national laboratory for the International Space Station. Unfortunately, we weren't able to win that RFP, but it was very critical when the county was able to pledge some local fundings to make us very competitive, and we were actually the runner-up in that program. We were the second ranked in that program. So, and that was a $150 million RFP from NASA. So this program will be, we don't envision it being utilized very often because these large-scale research and development opportunities don't come along that often, but we thought it was prudent in order to make these kind of funds available should these opportunities pop up. Moving along the graph, in the pre-seed area, this is the type of funding where our pre-seed program will come in and provide capital for early stage technology companies and high growth companies that have already done the basic research and development. They have a product, but they're still doing some tweaking and need to accomplish some initial tasks. This could be filing for patents, this could be filing for FDA regulatory approval, or it could be for doing some pilot and beta tests on their product. We have a program currently in place called the North Coast Opportunities Program, which provides that type of financing, and that will be the focus of my conversation today as I run through what that program would look like. Again, moving along the continuum here, as we move closer to the right side of the graph, where we start to have companies that are beginning to have sales, where they have customers lined up, they have contracts and letters of interest. These are companies that have some sales on the books but aren't yet profitable. They're incurring some revenue, but they're not at the point yet where they can fund a full-scale launch, commercial launch of their product. We've heard this from time and time again, both from early-stage companies, but also established companies that are trying to enter a new product into a new market. What they need is basically funding to provide a runway for them to fund that commercial scale-up, whether it be buying equipment or hiring employees, things of that nature. So these funds would focus on commercial launch. And lastly, in the same vein is our microfinance program. Again, these are companies that have sales, that have customers, and what they need is a little additional working capital so that they can expand their business and grow and thrive. Typically, in these areas of working capital, it's typically difficult to obtain traditional bank financing to fund these types of product launches and commercialization opportunities. So that's why providing some financing from the county is very beneficial. So as I said, the focus of my conversation tonight is going to be on our North Coast Opportunities Program. I think it'll give you a feel for how the process works, how we review these types of opportunities, and the types of criteria which we use to evaluate companies. So the NCO program was conceived in roughly 2006. The county was presented a unique opportunity to help accelerate early-stage, high-growth companies. The Ohio Third Frontier was created a program called the Entrepreneur Signature Program, which the state was going to be providing financing for technical assistance support to entrepreneurs. And so this provided us a way to where we could create a program and we could provide the direct investment and capital to the business, and then the Entrepreneur Signature Program would provide the technical assistance that the county could not provide. You know, we're not technology experts, nor should we be. We don't know, which technologies are going to be the next, boom in the market. If I knew that, then I would be a lot wealthier than I am. So what we're trying to do is partner with other organizations that have that technical expertise that can evaluate the market and evaluate the technology a lot better than we can. So all these innovation programs are really all about partnership with our regional economic development organizations in Northeast Ohio and Cuyahoga County. So the NCO program was created to accelerate technology-based entrepreneurship, create new high-paying jobs, and increase the flow of private investment. We were trying to target our funds to those companies that have a strong opportunity to attract follow-on investment. To date, we've invested $1.8 million in a portfolio of 19 companies. We've leveraged, when we initially created the program, we leveraged $15 million from the state of Ohio for Northeast Ohio, because our investments are matched by the state of Ohio for technical assistance. And since then, since the program began, the ESP program began, we have leveraged $28 million from the state of Ohio since 2006. That ESP program is managed and operated by Jumpstart. So the program is basically a payment deferred loan for specific projects that will attract follow-on funding. Essentially, it's non-dilutive capital for early-stage companies designed to mimic venture funding. So it's considered venture debt. And the reason that we structured this way is because typically these early-stage companies don't have the assets yet to raise significant amount of equity capital. Plus, it also diminishes their control over their company. That's why they view debt very favorably. The loans are secured with a blanket of filing statement on the company's assets and intellectual property. Loans range in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $125,000 at a fixed interest rate of 5%. And these payments are deferred for 5 years. So again, it's designed to mimic VC funding because we want to have a return on our investment at the end of 5 years. Typically, that's how VCs are structuring their investments, in a 5 to 7 year time frame to get payback. The loan proceeds must be used for a specific project. So what we're looking for is companies to propose to us something that they need to accomplish in order to attract that follow-on investment. And that could be, again, like as I said before, that could be filing for FDA, what's called an FDA 510K filing. So if you're introducing a new medical device, you have to file with the FDA under a certain stage of a medical device to show that it will not create any harm to human health. And that's an expensive process to go through for these small stage companies. And until they do that FDA filing, they're not going to get any venture capital funding. Another example is when dealing with some advanced manufacturing companies, they need to prototype and design a pilot scale of whatever equipment that they're trying to introduce into the market. We're dealing with one company that is is an advanced energy company and has a way of taking waste municipal plastics and converting it into biofuel, or not biofuel, but crude oil. So they're basically, for lack of a better word, melting down the plastics and converting into crude oil. Well, they needed help to create their first pilot scale piece of equipment. So this funding helps them accomplish those milestones so that they can then go out into the market and raise that follow-on funding. In the county, we administer the program. We manage all the funds. We manage from application through disbursement through monitoring. We handle the whole program. As I said, we work with our partners with Jumpstart and with also with Magnet and also Lorraine Community College through their Glide Innovation Program to help us assess these industries and these technologies, but also help to drive deal flow. They're out in the community talking with these entrepreneurs on a daily basis, and it's very critical for us to identify the greatest opportunities, those companies that have the best opportunity, and bring them forward. So it's almost kind of a pre-qualification, or not qualification, but a pre-review process so that we're getting the cream of the crop that are coming to us. And our process is very, very competitive. To date, as I said, we've capitalized the fund with $2 million investment, but we've invested $1.8 in 19 companies. And that portfolio of 19 companies has successfully raised over $10.5 million in follow-on funding since we created the program in 2008. So in little over 3 years, we've more than quadrupled our investment. Our companies have been profiled by the national media, by NPR, ABC News, Business Week, and Bloomberg. Bloomberg News has highlighted several of our companies as the up-and-coming entrepreneurs to be on the lookout. Our eligibility, again, we're looking for high-growth companies that are venturable. These companies must be located in or planning to locate in Cuyahoga County. Again, these are very early-stage companies. Sometimes they are virtual in nature, but we require that they must have a physical presence in Cuyahoga County before we will be able to proceed with funding. And actually, to date, the program of the 19 companies that we funded, we've actually attracted 5 companies to locate here in Cuyahoga County. As I said, because this is a program that is matching Ohio Third Frontier dollars through the ESP program, we require that they register with Jumpstart and the ESP program to make sure that they are getting that technical assistance that is going to be so crucial to help them develop. To give you a sense of our application process, as I said, we have a funding round that runs every other month. It's a competitive loan program. So there's a deadline every other month where the company must submit an application, which is actually in your binder of information that was provided to you. It's essentially, we're asking for basic information about the company, the technology, how much money they've raised to date. As part of that application, they must also submit a 5-page business plan of defining what their product is, what market they're targeting, the size of that market, and what is their management that is running the company, defining their management. The most critical piece in that application, though, is actually the project. They must submit a 2-page summary of the project that they're seeking funding for. And we look at this very critically because we want to make sure that the taxpayer dollars, the county investment, is being used as something that is going to actually help the company progress and grow. We don't want to send our money in there with ill-defined parameters and at the end of the day have no results to show for it. So we're very, very keen on making sure that the project that we're going to be funding is thoroughly thought out and does have a rationale for how they're going to attract follow-on funding. Because essentially what we're looking for, that follow-on funding is going to be our takeout funding. Without that follow-on funding, the county will be the only one in there. With that follow-on funding, the county can be paid back and taken out. So in essence, this in some ways acts as almost like a bridge loan to venture capital funding. So we have a selection process where they submit the application. We have a review panel comprised of the county through the Department of Development, Jumpstart, Magnet, and the entrepreneurs and residents. These are essentially industry experts that are paid for by the Third Frontier Entrepreneur Signature Program that provide the one-on-one technical assistance to the companies. the review panel looks at these applications, and we select the 3 highest ranked companies to come and present to us. Once we have those companies present to us what their project is, what their company is, we then have a rank scoring system whereby we then select one and make a recommendation to the county to provide funding. So this is just a recommendation that the review panel provides. And then we either go to, depending upon the dollar value, we either go to the Contracting and Purchasing Board or the Board of Control to get final approval for the loan. And when we're working through that process, once the loan is approved, the Department of Development then works with the entrepreneur to define the project milestones, the project budget, and the project objective. Again, we want to make sure that we have specific milestones in which we are going to measure success and which we are going to provide financing for. The review criteria, again, it's in your packet of information. There's a scoring matrix which we use to review these companies. Basically, it's split into 2 categories. We're, again, looking at the business opportunity. We're assessing the product, the market that they're trying to target. Is it a large market or is it a small market? Is the management in place? Do they have the proper management? That's very critical with early stage companies. Sometimes you'll have the inventor of the technology that understands the technology backwards and forwards, but they don't really have expertise in running and managing a business and attracting follow-on funding. So that is a very critical piece in in scoring and ranking these applications that we receive. And then we also look at the type of company to see what kind of, is it in an area that is going to be attracting follow-on investment. And then the second piece is looking at the project again. Will this project lead to follow-on funding is really the biggest criteria in which we focus on very heavily. So the evaluation process.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask?
Yes.
As you review the criteria and the management resources, if they don't have those necessary resources, as you say, they understand their product but don't have that business background, is there going to be support for them, or is it don't meet the criteria and you move on, or use a human service term, is there going to be some wraparound service to support them if they don't meet the necessary criteria for management services skills?
So the short and simple is yes. That's why we created this program as part of the Entrepreneur Signature Program run by and managed by Jumpstart, is because the entrepreneurs in residence, these are the technical experts in industry and technology that do provide that technical assistance to those companies. We've had many companies that have come through our process that did not receive funding, but we don't just say thank you for coming, good luck. No, we continue to work with these companies, and many of them have reapplied and actually have received funding. So that's why this program is so critical on partnerships with other economic development intermediaries to make sure that they do have that type of assistance going forward if they should not be selected for funding.
Next question, Mr. Brady, and then Mr. Germano. I think is that.
This is it's more of a statement, actually. I've been kind of trying to plow through a lot of this stuff, and a lot of what you've been presenting to us is explaining the way things are done and existing partners that we actually have, programs that have been in place, and that the county has been working on for some amount of time. As we go through this process of, I'd like somebody somewhere to keep in mind how to convey to us what is new, what's different about this than the way we presently do things, except for the obvious fact that we're bankrolling this $100 million loan program, which is not insignificant at all. But I do obviously I can recognize some new elements, but there's this, sometimes it's hard, although it's very, very informative tutored about how you do what you do, it's also sometimes not easy for me to be able to distinguish what you do from what you want to do, if that makes any sense.
So what we were doing basically was trying to walk through an existing program. But as Larry had shown before, there are 3 other programs in this particular innovation vertical or category of the fund that will be launched. And these are going to be new programs. Again, they're going to be along the similar vein of trying to help entrepreneurial companies to grow and thrive in Cuyahoga County. One example would be the micro enterprise program, which we think will be the next program that will be launched. And essentially that program is going to be an RFP. We're going to be developing a new relationship with a new partner to make sure that we have those businesses, which may not be the high growth companies, which may not be the companies that are going to employ hundreds of employees, but maybe 10 or 15 employees at a time. That's going to be a new program for us. And we're going to be creating a new partnership with a new organization to help us manage that program and to identify these micro-oriented enterprises, to work with them. And that's going to be a new process. It's going to be a new program providing a new source, a new type of capital.
I think if I can summarize, Mr. Braze, when is he going to see that information about, for example, the micro enterprise, and how is that going to apply? What is it going to be any different than what we just got done seeing? And how are we going to get those tools to have a chance to study those?
Throughout the whole,
Right.
Mr. Chairman, just throughout this whole process, I'm not looking for one specific silver bullet answer to anything. I think throughout this whole process, I'm trying to distinguish between what we do now and what we are trying to do, because I've read it, it's very ambitious, it's very interesting, but I'm, I want to know what's different about it.
Through the chair, if I may, Larry Benders from the Department of Development. First of all, Greg's doing a great job. You're doing a wonderful job. Mr. Councilperson, this is exactly the point. What we're trying to say to you is we have the capacity, we have a process today, and we want to bring it to scale. So we're trying to demonstrate that we know what it takes to do this. We just haven't had the resources to do it in a big way. That's really what we're trying to say. Secondly, the first real new program you'll see will be micro lending, and that'll be through an RFP process that'll go through the appropriate approval bodies to let the RFP. That will be the first one. That's very, very, very different for us. But what we want to say is there is a process inside that you haven't seen before, and we want you to have confidence that there is a first step, there's an engagement, there are applications, there are evaluations, there are metrics along the way, whether it's in commercial property, or in innovation or attraction. That's what we're trying to leave you with, that we have the confidence and the systems to do this.
And Mr. Chairman, in what I'm reading, it seems to me that there's also a difference in what you're actually trying to accomplish. There's at least a narrative here that you're trying to do things differently, and that you're trying to find a different way of approaching economic development than has been approached in the past. And that's what I'm really trying to sort of pull out.
Through the chair, absolutely. And that's what the plan said. And the plan said is county, Department of Development, find your role, play the appropriate role, find the right partners, let the partners do their job and support them when you can. That's the process. Exactly, sir.
Mr. Germana, and then Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Zucco, understand you're going, this process, and without getting into micromanaging it, the thought occurred to me when you're scoring, what basis did you come upon? Is there a model that you're using for so many points for so many different things? I mean, where did the validity of the scoring come from? Is there an economic model or a new business formula for the scoring?
I'll be quite honest with you. We developed it internally when we initially launched the NCO program, and we partnered with At the time, it was Nortec who originally received the ESP award from the Ohio Third Frontier. We looked throughout the country for a best practice model in which we could base ourselves off of. And quite frankly, there wasn't one. To date, we haven't really found any kind of local government that is providing this type of assistance to early stage companies. So we had to work very diligently back and forth with ourselves to try to come up with a process and a scoring matrix that would encapsulate the types of qualities that we would need to see, or that a venture capitalist would look for in a company to decide, to make the determination of whether or not to provide that funding. So really, rather than looking to other programs, we try to look at, okay, well, how do venture capitalists who operate in this space, how do they review companies? What types of things are they looking for? And because we wanted to be, again, very focused on a project, we made sure that that was weighted higher with the point system that we developed. Because again, we wanted to make sure that we were funding something that was understandable, that was very focused, and was really going to lead that company to success. But I would like to add, though, to date, because of the success of the program, several municipalities in Northeast Ohio have modeled their own programs after the county's program. The City of Worcester created the Worcester Opportunities Fund. The City of Canton created its own fund for entrepreneurs, and also Mansfield also created the I think it's called the Appleseed Fund. So we shared our success and some of our learning experience with these other municipalities and governments to share what we've done so that their funds could be successful.
Mr. Simon? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
I apologize.
that's a great answer, and it sounds to me like, if you listed this would be the ABCs of success for a company if they had a hand and saw that this is successful, it's worked, it's been copied, it's from the ground up, and you want it successful, you should be looking at these criteria and to see if you touched all the bases. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a follow-up to Councilman Germana's question, and it wasn't my original question, in terms of the scoring and the factors considered, is there a consideration to how environmentally sound the ideas and the companies are in terms of their impact and the environment, LEED certified, green technology? Is that come into play in terms of the scoring?
It doesn't come into effect in the direct scoring because most of these companies, as I said, are somewhat virtual in nature, in that they're just starting out. So they tend not to have like a big physical footprint. They're often occupying a desk at an incubator, and a lot of them are technology companies where they have it's an IT technology. So, but there are in the portfolio some companies that are operating in the advanced energy and sustainable industry markets.
I understand that. So it's just a different market, and you gave an example of the plastic being melted to convert into oil, crude oil. So that's just a different kind of company. It doesn't get any additional points for being, in my mind, maybe environmentally sensitive.
Correct. They would not
Okay.
get any additional scoring.
Okay, that wasn't my question. So just a follow-up to that. But my real question is on the follow-on funding, which seems, as I heard you say, is one of the key components to success and whether there'll be a loan extended. What's the success rate in the follow-on funding specifically in the history of this project from 2008 percentage-wise? Has every loan that's been extended to an enterprise acquired their follow-on funding? Is there a percentage? Are you basing your success on that?
Yeah, well, yes, we are basing our success, partially our success on that. Big success would be having all the loans repaid. That's the real success and jobs being created. But that is one of the metrics that we look at as follow-on funding. Percentage, I don't have that in front of me to bring you that calculation, but As I said before, the 19 companies have raised $10.5 million in total as a combined portfolio of follow-on investment. 3 of the companies, and I apologize, I failed to mention this. So the loan matures either at the end of 5 years or at a point in time in which the company raises $1.5 million in follow-on funding from when we provide the initial loan. 4 companies have indicated to me that they will be reaching that $1.5 million threshold within the next 3 to 6 months. So those loans will be paid back in the next 3 to 6 months. So that's 4 companies out of the portfolio of 19. We're very pleased with that success rate. These will all be paying off earlier than the 5-year time frame. So, to that respect, it has been, we're pleased with the return.
One last question. In terms of the follow-on funding and the investors, does the county, and I think the answer is no, get involved with the actual contracts that are entered into for the capital infusion and the funding into these startup companies, and in that and secure our repayment other than that which is set forth in the beginning extension of the loan or the metrics you have? Do we get involved in that stage?
Yeah, from time to time, yes, we do. So when there is some investment coming into the company, usually it's on the neighborhood of $200,000 or $300,000 coming into the company. There are times where we do have to execute an intercreditor agreement with that other investor, and that's usually when it's debt investment into the company. Typically, when it's equity investment, they're not taking any kind of collateral position other than just taking ownership of the company. But there are times when it is other debt coming into the company, and sometimes it's coming from the state of Ohio, where we do have to enter into an intercreditor agreement and negotiate the position on the assets.
County Executive, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a couple. I wanted to address what I didn't totally hear answered. I don't think from Mr. Brady, Councilman Brady's question that I wanted to try to accentuate a little bit. I went to the first time I went to a Department of Development presentation was sometime in, I think, early 2010, and they had a presentation for county executive and county council candidates. And a friend of mine who I was with at the time, after I heard the presentation, I said, a lot of these programs are great programs, but in terms of working at the city, we're not even talking about these programs with them. And I went back and talked to Mr. Kelly, who was my development director at the time, and I said, I heard about these great programs. Why aren't we talking about how we're using them in our city? And the answer was, the basic answer, which I'm convinced is true now that I'm here, is that just not having the scale that we're going to have now is really a difference between night and day. I mean, it's really different. You can have a program that is perfectly designed, that has the right vetting process, that has all the steps of the evaluation process that it should, but if you don't have the scale to do it, it's the difference between substance and rhetoric. I'll give you a quick example from the rest of Ohio. I read an article in the Cincinnati Enquirer about they just passed their one-year budget recently, and they passed what they called a jobs budget. And they called it a jobs budget because they had dedicated about $1 million to economic development in a budget of about $1 billion. And they said that this was what was making it a jobs budget. It really is partially just about the resources. However, so that's part of the answer. You referred to that in your questioning. But that is a significant difference, because it's going to allow us to be a player in a way that we never have been before, in the way that economic development is stimulated and shaped in this area. Secondly, a lot of the processes that the development department had already established in terms of having engagement, outside partners evaluating programs, whether it's through the entrepreneur in residence program or whatever it might be, and then some type of outside check, and then eventually an approval by a governmental body. and then some metrics to evaluate the process, that is a best practice. So I don't think the evaluation process was significantly flawed, and that's actually been proved by the previous record of the Department of Development, which hasn't had a lot of failures, to be honest with you. The loans that they made, even with the limited funds that they were given, were appropriate and were of a benefit to the county and the county government. So all of that made sense. But what I don't think that we probably did justice to in our answer to the question was, if you go back on the slide project, and Larry, if you could help, because you and I just went through some of this. So go back to the launch calendar. Go back to the launch calendar slide, if you would, just quickly.
Oh.
I can't go back. Are you going back
Yeah,
to it?
it's here waiting.
Oh, it is. And Larry can probably go through these, but a number of these have not been done before. So the process on a lot of them has been explained, but a lot of these things were not done at all, and were not really funded, either not funded at all. And Larry can probably go through those, but everything's from some of the innovation matches to small business growth, incumbent worker training, accelerated growth, large-scale attractions. We weren't doing these things. But why don't you, I think that's important, because I think the council might be getting impatient to be hearing some of those things. So I may be short. And my understanding of today's council meeting was also that they did want to talk about process, that there were process questions that were raised last time. But since that question had been raised, if you wouldn't mind, with permission of Chair, if you could just go through some of the things that are new in terms of the kinds of programs that will be funded. Okay.
Well, I think to the county executive's point, it's obvious on this chart, on the ones that Mr. Zuko is going to be talking about, on the innovation, back to Mr. Brady's question, the micro enterprise is new. It's going to have a new concept. It's going to have a new application. What we got was, I think, a very short coverage that's going to be an RFQ or an RFP that's going to go out there, but that was all we got. I don't think we got the meat and potatoes around that very subject as far as what the RFQ is going to look like, how we're going to go back and invent that. Are we going to be part of that process as it gets written up and things of that nature? Because we haven't heard that piece.
Mr. Executive, Mr. Chairman, the way the launch calendar works is the longer we wait, the ones we launch soonest are the ones we do right now. And the further you move out in time are the ones we are less familiar with, in effect, really. So we're launching the first 5 because we have programs in place. We have the materials in place. We know it. We don't have to RFP. As we go further in time, we have to RFP. We have to find other partners. We need to generate more capacity to do it. That's how the flighting worked. So we're ready in January with things we know we can do with a high degree of confidence. So that's how you can read them. The ones we know today: pre-seed, modernization, site expansion, generally redevelopment ready, and large-scale attraction. We don't really have a large-scale attraction fund, but Mr. Kelly's going to talk about something you know about already in a few moments. And then as you go all the way far to the right to accelerated growth, the innovation match, which we do not really have now, although Mr. Zuka referred to a small program, and then the next stage funding. So that's how we came up to this. We know the ones we know today, inside out, are the first ones we're launching.
Do you envision that we'll come back and revisit the ones that are going to get launched in the future as you go through that to satisfy Mr. Brady's question, or is your envisioning that what gets approved is that we take it on faith as to the launch and all the other components?
I would hope that we'd approve the whole package when the council does review it. But there are always check-in points. We'll be back all the time talking to you about how we're proceeding with this program. And we'll come and seek your advice on some of these programs and update you on how it's going. I would expect by mid-February we'll be back again talking about how the first launches went. What did we learn? What worked? What didn't work?
Okay. I think the next question was Mr. Rogers. Did you?
This was just related to the earlier question from Ms. Simon, but you mentioned that once a company raises 1.5 above what we've provided to them, that then the loan has to be repaid?
Correct, yes.
And that's including if that additional money is from other loans?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the deferred payment, in the deferred period, the loan is accruing 5% interest. And so all principal and interest is due at either 5 years or at the point in time in which they successfully raise $1.5 million in follow-on funding.
Just to follow up on that, I would imagine that there are some circumstances where they may receive additional loans, but it would stipulate that that loan can't be, it would have a specific purpose on what that loan could be used for. Do you find it where, they can't borrow money to pay down the loan on another?
Well, typically, and typically these companies are so early stage, they're not getting a lot of traditional bank debt financing. They're usually getting government financing through the state of Ohio, whether it be the Ohio Innovation Loan Fund program, or sometimes they're getting funding from the federal government, but that's very few and far between. But we have a strong working relationship with the Ohio Department of Development, and when we've come across these issues, we do work with them, and they're more than willing to either take us out as part of that financing event, because the amounts of capital, or the amount of the loan that we're providing is a small percentage of the total funding that they're getting from the state. So they're usually agreeable with taking the county out in those instances.
Gotcha. Just kind of sounded like you're getting a MasterCard to pay up for Visa.
Well, but it, just to Mr. Rogers' point, would it be fairly common that the early stage carries with it some security interests, and that the second takeout people want to replace and knock that security out and be in the first position? So my assumption is that an assumption that why the second folks are happy to take the first folks out?
Correct.
Okay. Please continue.
Well, I mean, that pretty much covered the NCO program that I wanted to discuss, and so I guess we will move on now to the Commercial Property Utilization Fund.
I'm sorry, I let everybody ask their questions now, so the chair deferred to ask it. And so, sorry, you also lost the toss, because first one up of the three usually gets more questions. As we get later in the evening, they get shorter and shorter. Couple questions. I see Lorain County is on there. Why wouldn't there be an apparent apparent conflict of interest with their GLIDE program, because they got to be enticing and interested in getting perhaps that same business to land in Lorain County versus Cuyahoga County, would they not?
So that program is actually run through the Lorain County Community College. So it's not a function of the county government per se. And the program the GLIDE program, the Innovation Fund is what the name of their fund is called, is actually funded by the Ohio Third Frontier program. So they are agnostic to physical location. They are funding companies throughout the area. I think the majority of their portfolio is companies that are based in Cuyahoga County. So it's a collaboration of universities throughout Northeast Ohio, including Kent, Akron, Cleveland State, where they all partner in on this fund and manage it together. So they're not as concerned about physical location as the county is.
Okay, so Innovation Fund of Lorain County has no conflict with their sitting on the review panel?
No.
Okay,
in fact, it works out quite well, because their program, they require a one-to-one match. So oftentimes we'll have a company where we're both providing funds to that same company at the same time, and we will coordinate ourselves very closely to make sure that our projects are aligned with one another, to make sure that, again, that the company is progressing.
And then same question in regards to, I see we have like BioEnterprise and Jumpstart. Some of those are follow-on investors themselves, as far as that. Does that create a conflict whereby they're the ones who originally were the selection process, and then they are potentially the takeout folks on the next round?
So it's not, because the Jumpstart is an organization that basically has its operations separate categories. So there's Jumpstart Ventures, and those individuals do not participate in the review of the companies. We're working with the Jumpstart Entrepreneurial Network, which is a different subset and is funded completely by the state of Ohio. Jumpstart Ventures receives a different pot of funding from a different, so those two functions of Jumpstart are separate from one another. So that conflict doesn't really come into play. But there have been instances where we've had a company that the county has funded and then was successful in going through the Jumpstart Venture program and did receive funding. And in that instance, we did have to negotiate an intercreditor agreement with Jumpstart because we had to share a first position on the company's assets.
It just seems like if they're the ones doing the selection, they're the ones identifying the successful candidates, and then they potentially, another arm of that same organization or an extension would then be involved with the takeout. It looks, or bioenterprise could be in there. It just seems that if they're on the review panel, that there's potential for some conflict as they review and then come later on into the takeout piece. Just a comment more than anything else in regards to that. I think we need to be cautious and conscious of that. This maybe is a question for Mr. Benders, but I'm not sure. Is there a percentage that we have allocated for these three major buckets of the innovation? Are we looking, or a dollar amount that we're going to go in, that goes into the innovation piece?
Mr. Chairman, no, we have not set such measures or such constraints on the fund yet. We have not done that, sir.
Okay, I think someplace along here there was a question as to probably this is a higher degree of risk than the other two major categories that we're talking about as far as the commercial property or the business growth piece.
Generally small. The loans are generally small in this program, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so but the risk is generally higher, I would assume. Is that a correlation between the two?
Yes, directly.
And there was a comment in there that these are going to be targeted towards companies that are planning to move into Cuyahoga County. Where are they coming from?
Well, they had to be eligible for the fund. You have to either be in Cuyahoga County or planning to locate to Cuyahoga County.
Coming from where?
Anywhere.
Okay, all right. So the intent
We've had a company. One company was actually coming from Las Vegas.
Okay, so the intent is that this is going to be something we're going to use as an inducement to get somebody to move
Correct.
and to relocate. Okay. When will we hear about the methodology on the microloans? Do you have any idea how soon?
So we're right now we're working with several partners right now currently that operate in this space of micro enterprise development. And we're trying to collaborate with these partners to make sure that we're all trying to work together and create a network of support for micro enterprise businesses. So what we're envisioning is that in the first quarter of 2012, we will begin to put together an RFP that will have a scope of services that we will be looking for to put into an RFP process. There's a copy of a scope of services for a current microenterprise program that we have currently in place. It's a very small program. It's only $250,000 that we've been operating, and it's utilizing our CDBG dollars, which are restrictive in nature because it doesn't give us the level of flexibility that we need to provide financing, because there are certain communities in Cuyahoga County that get their own CDBG allocation, so we can't spend those dollars. And so by using CDBG dollars to create a microenterprise program, it complicates our ability to help companies. So we're going to use that initial scope of services as a starting point. But again, as I said, there are some new organizations that are starting to target microenterprise programs. We want to make sure that we're working with whether it be the community development corporations within the city of Cleveland, but also with the local municipalities throughout the county to make sure that we're developing a microenterprise program that is going to help the businesses that our municipalities and our communities work with.
Thank you. I just want to be conscious of Mr. Brady's issues about what's new and when he gets a chance to hear about it. So we can keep on that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mr. Germano.
give me an explanation of what is a micro enterprise? What's the definition of a micro enterprise organization?
So typically the SBA's definition of a micro enterprise is, I believe it's 20 or fewer employees is typically the definition of a micro enterprise. And as a subset of that, traditionally micro enterprise loans are loans of anywhere between $5,000 and $35,000 in a loan. We're actually going to stretch that and say anything less than $100,000 is probably the type of loan that we would be looking to invest. But these are typically companies that are looking, as an alternative to using their credit card to fund their business growth, whether it be buying inventory or buying a new display counter for their products. So these are very small loans. They need to happen very rapidly. And so we felt that it would be more beneficial to do an RFP process and work through an intermediary that could move quicker than having, $50 or so $5,000 loans coming through the county process and coming before the various review panels that we have here at the county. We thought it would be more efficient and effective for these small businesses to go through an intermediary partnership.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You mentioned partners. Who are those partners with the microloan?
So
Enterprise?
that's why we need to do the RFP process, is to identify those partners. But right now, our current program, we're operating in partnership with the WECO Fund. They operate a micro enterprise loan program currently in place. There are other organizations that are looking to potentially create their own micro enterprise loan programs, various nonprofit organizations in the community. So we need to competitively bid this to make sure that we're getting the best stewards for our dollars and picking the best organization that have the best processes in place.
If you collaborate with some of the CDCs of the county, will there be measurements for their success? And if they're not performing, will you be looking to reevaluate those relationships?
Yes, that'll all be in the RFP. I mean, so we will be setting metrics in which we are going to measure their success. That's going to be a determining factor of the organization that we select to manage this fund on our behalf.
Mr. Brady, did you?
Just a follow-up to Mr. Jones's question. On one of these other documents that I have under the partnerships, and I can see that this is a work in progress. I understand you're going to go out with an RFP. You've got several partners listed here. They're microenterprise. I won't list them myself, but one of them is NPI. And I was wondering if you could just briefly, is this a wish list? I mean, it doesn't sound right when I say it that way, but you know what I'm trying to say is how mature is this relationship?
So we've been working with the Cleveland Foundation. They have sponsored several informal meetings with organizations that typically work with micro enterprises in the community. And they have been doing an assessment of what is the demand for micro enterprise loans and looking at the landscape and the market of Cuyahoga County. They issued a report, and it was based on a lot of SBA data, and they basically determined that there was a pent-up demand for micro enterprise funding in the community. There were a lot of nonprofit organizations that were participating in this task force. NPI was one of them. A lot of the CDCs were also partnering in this. CNDC, the Cleveland Neighborhood Development Coalition, was also participating. The WECO Fund participated, and other foundations were also participating in this. So there's a community of organizations that are trying to target micro enterprises and try to provide access to capital for these organizations. That a report that the Cleveland Foundation funded identified this as an issue of an area that is not being met. The demand is not being met sufficiently. So, it is a work in progress, and we want to make sure that we don't rush out of the gate and put a program out there without first consulting with all our partners. And we're taking all that work that the Cleveland Foundation has done and these organizations to draft an RFP that is, recognizes all that work that has been done to date.
Well, I would just imagine that a lot of this is about developing a new level of communication because there's so many different people, so many different organizations that have been working, are networking, and you're plugging into them, but it's constantly. I mean, it's always changing. And it seems like, trying to find just a new level of coordination and information cooperation, of information sources and coordinating finding out what people are doing and coordinating these things is like a big part of this. And I don't know whose job that is exactly, I guess.
Well, right now we're trying to play that role. We're trying to be that body that's trying to coordinate all these organizations, including the municipalities, to try to make sure that we all are talking together and targeting and creating a program that will address the needs of all the communities, and making sure that we will be wisely investing our dollars and helping businesses grow.
I mean, because just finally, because I know we could go on all night, I'm starting to get, as you would expect, starting to get inquiries, not from individual companies, but from these networks.
Through the chair, Larry Benders again from the Department of Development. I think the key for us is getting the RFP right. It's getting the questions right. What are we looking for? What is that? What's the outcome we want? And then let the communities respond. Let them partner, get together, and figure out how they can answer the question. I think that's where we're pushing to. And
just as maybe as a cautionary word, that rather than go from the 5 to 25 up to the 5 to 100, a lot of these brackets that you're showing in these 11 are going to overlap as far as the type of technique and the funding. Maybe even though I'm ordinarily a big guy as far as big numbers and growing, this might be one where we walk gingerly from the 25 to 50 as opposed to 25 to 100. Historically, that doesn't sound like things that I would be saying, but in this particular case with micro, you get 4 times the impact of a 25 versus $100,000. So as we learn by this, I think it might be a place where we walk gingerly as we go through this process. So just as a suggestion. So. Any questions at all in regards to that? I know that we're going to get into the other 2 major areas. Greg, sorry about being the first guy on the docket.
Problem. My pleasure.
Thank you much. Appreciate it. Nice job.
How about Laura Clark from the Department of Development to talk about commercial property reutilization? And the good news, at least from the Manning chart on this, the line chart on this is all 3 of these are going to get launched at the same time. Is that correct, Laura?
Yes.
And they're going to be launched right at the beginning, so whatever you hear is what the program's going to be.
Right. Hi, Laura Clark, Department of Development. Thank you. Yes, to the chairman's point, all 3 programs are launching at once. Redevelopment and modernization is new. Site expansion exists and hasn't been changed at all. And redevelopment ready has been tweaked slightly. It currently exists now. So I'm going to run through these quickly. I've presented them to the committee before, but I'll go back over them and just kind of go through the 3 programs. The underwriting is the same for all 3 programs, and the loan terms are similar for 2 and 1 slightly different. Please stop me if I throw too many acronyms at you or if something's not clear. Redevelopment and modernization is pretty much for renovating buildings, tenant improvements, and modernizing buildings. This is an answer to the fact that that's a problem plaguing a lot of our communities. Mm-hmm. They have empty buildings. They don't necessarily have brownfield sites. They just have buildings. They may have asbestos. They may not. They may just need to be modernized. So this is our response to that need. These loans are available at up to $1 million. They're partially forgivable. The interest rate is 4%, 2 years interest only because it's a construction loan initially, and then an 8-year P&I term. Eligibility, for-profit borrower. We want support from the local municipality that they're happy with the project moving forward. The borrower must own and operate the site for a minimum of 5 years after the project is completed. And we hope to get a viable asset back into your community. The site expansion program is an existing brownfield program that we have now. It's pretty popular. It's for companies that are expanding and the property next to them is contaminated and it limits their expansion realities. So this one is based on job creation usually. In the past, we did it as a 1 per 35,000 to determine the scale of the loan. We now are doing it pretty much the same way. It's up to $500,000. It's fully forgivable because it's based on the job creation. 0% interest during the time that the borrower is carrying the loan. Again, for-profit borrowers, support from the local municipality. The borrower must oversee their cleanup project. They must get an NFA, and they must own and operate at the site for a minimum of 7 years after the project is completed. We're really trying to discourage people using our funds to flip the properties and disappear. The Redevelopment Ready program is, again, a tweak on an existing program. This is our Brownfield Redevelopment Fund. This is loans of up to $1 million, partially forgivable, 4% interest for 10 years, for-profit borrowers. They must own and operate at the site for approximately 5 years. The underwriting for these loans will do a 90% loan to value. We want a first or second mortgage position on the property. We want a debt coverage ratio of at least 1.1%. Now I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the history of the commercial property redevelopment program in the department, and then I'm going to walk you through an example project. Sorry. Okay. So the point of the commercial property reutilization program is to attract, expand, and retain businesses in a pretty much entirely developed county. We really struggle to compete with Summit County, Medina County, Lorain County. They've got green space. It's really inexpensive. Our programs are designed to drop the cost, to write down the cost of redeveloping that land or redeveloping that building and staying in our county, as opposed to going out to where redevelopment may have been a little less expensive and a little quicker because you didn't have to clean up your property or contend with other issues. Some advantages to our county that we feel make our programs attractive in tandem with what we offer are our incredible logistics, our airports, our trains, our highways, our active port. We have existing infrastructure and utilities. We have excellent public transportation, and we have a skilled workforce. The commercial property programs started at the county in 1998 when the first bonds were issued for brownfield redevelopment. They were the first bonds ever issued in the United States solely for brownfield redevelopment. We are now on our second bond issuance. Those funds, along with other funds that we have used from US EPA, have pulled in $70 million in outside funding for projects in the county. Now, I will tell you too, because I pulled up this statistic before I came tonight. So that's the funding that we've attracted from the feds, the state, and tax credits, the $70 million. Our programs, the county's investment, has leveraged $455 million in private investment to date. This is a slide I did when I taught a class at CSU this spring. People are pretty into our county brownfield programs. They think we're pretty cool. So we go on the road a lot, and we like to flash our statistics. So we've put about $68 million on the streets between US EPA, which would be the Environmental Site Assessment Program on the first line, the Brownfield Redevelopment Fund loans, which are the bonds I mentioned, the US EPA Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund, which is a grant from US EPA to the county, Clean Ohio Assistance / Revitalization Fund, which is the state of Ohio's program, and the HUD Betty, which is through US Department of Housing and Urban Development. So, with all this money available, why do we need the Vision Fund? Well, the external funding is drying up. The feds have successively cut back the sources available for grants, and it's getting incredibly more competitive. The county was always a very strong contender for US EPA funding, but we're finding ourselves getting into a cycle where we're every other year. We're no longer getting consistently funded. There's just not enough to go around. And the state, same thing. They're pumping all their money to Jobs Ohio. We hope to access that, but their programs are changing as well. And while the state has been very supportive of brownfield redevelopment, the Clean Ohio program is changing, so we're not sure how much money we're going to be able to get moving forward from that program. The other problem with grants is they're competitive. There's no guarantee we're going to win just because we apply and we're a strong competitor. And the use restrictions. Federal funds come with a lot of cross-cutting requirements, and the state has requirements as well, and it doesn't always fit the project or the timeline. And the funds may not always work for the cost that the borrower has or the project has. Therefore, the Vision Fund, the local strategy, needs local funds. So here's where I want to walk you through a project. In your book that Nate gave you, there is a sample application for my site expansion program, I think. Let me look with you. Yes, okay, so actually you have a program description summary first, and then a loan application. So how it's generally worked in our agency, and it's seem to work pretty well. We get leads from a lot of different people. We get leads from municipalities, businesses, environmental consultants, developers, realtors, brokers, and economic development consultants. They'll give us a call, we'll go out to the site, they'll come down to the county, we'll take a meeting. We found that it's really helpful, especially when we're dealing with the environmental projects, that we have that upfront meeting to sort of flesh out any issues, any eligibility problems, what's really going on with your site, what's your vision, what's your timeline, are we going to be nimble enough for you? And then if we feel that it's a fit and everybody seems to think that this is going to work out, we issue the program description summary and the loan application. As soon as the borrower can get that back to us, we go through it, we review it. A large part of the review is the financial analysis. Are they going to be creditworthy? Are they going to repay us? Can we get a good mortgage? So I also have here with me, if someone would want to see it, an example of that financial analysis. Then we prepare a loan summary packet for the CCCIC, I think I said it right, the ED Loan Committee, for their consideration, and it goes through the project, why it's an economic benefit to the county, the jobs, gives the financial analysis, the appraisal, how we're going to secure it, and then the department makes a recommendation to the ED Loan Committee as to whether or not they're seeking their approval to refer it to the county for the legislative approval. And then, as the director mentioned before, the ultimate approval resides with the county. Whether it's the controlling board, the council, or the executive, that is the final approval. Then once the project goes live, after it's been approved by the county, we issue a letter of intent, so the borrower, if they're seeking other financing, or if they need that for the seller, or for any other reason, they have it in hand. And we start doing loan documents. I have example loan documents here as well. And then we move forward. I know I went through this very quickly, so if you have any questions.
Are there any questions? I assume we do. I know that Mr. Jones, you indicated first.
No question.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean to. She was just in the process of concluding it. Yes, Ms. Conwell, Mr. Brady. Yes. Okay.
The last thought that you mentioned, you said if they're credit worthy.
Yes.
Have we thought through the process if they meet the credit worthiness and they still default? Have we thought of a process of how we would handle that?
Oh, yes.
That was the case.
Unfortunately, we do have some loans in default now. We work with the prosecutor's office. We refer those immediately. Once they stop paying, generally payments are collected quarterly by our agency. If they go a quarter and they haven't paid, we issue a nice note, hey, you missed your payment. If we don't hear from them, usually do a follow-up call or an email, depending on the information we have on the borrower, what our modus of communication has been to that time. And if there's no response or if there's no check coming, frankly, to the county, we refer to the prosecutor's office and they begin the process of notifying the borrower they're in default.
So what happens to that business or whatever?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, they default, the prosecutors go after them. I'm familiar with the foreclosure process, but I don't know with businesses what exactly happens.
You mean, are we putting people out of business or?
Right.
No, we have not put anyone out of business to date. We have had some businesses go out of business and then they stopped paying us because they were going out of business or they were struggling. We do, I would say our portfolio currently is about 50-50 developers versus private businesses. So we've got some situations where developers weren't unable to get their buildings filled. We have some situations where businesses just weren't successful. They weren't able to, especially with the economic crisis in 2008, they weren't able to sustain their business models. We do a discovery of assets and we try to recover whatever we can.
Mr. Brady?
You're not finished with your presentation, right? You just
Did I
finished
flip
with
through
the.
it?
No, I think she was. I thought she did.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I don't, that's why I asked. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Don't mean it that way it sounds maybe. At some point, and this is not the point, but at some point, I would like to see to the chairman and to the Economic Development Committee and to the council and to the administration, I'd like to see a good discussion about how the land bank might fit into all of this and what the administration's vision for how the land bank fits in. And it's obvious to me that it does, and that This is very interesting to me. This has, I'm sure other people have districts and see it and maybe see the same thing I do, but I see my district written all over this. And so, of course, I'm interested and focused, and I know that the land bank is easily an important partner in this process and is listed as such.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Sure,
Larry
Mr.
Benders
Benders?
here. Yes, we are working closely with the land bank. It's as if, my view is we can point the land bank, we can help the land bank set priorities. You say, here are the key areas, here are the top 10 things we want to get done. How can we do it through the land bank's tool? So that's the kind of the agreement that we have, that we'll inform the land bank about what our priorities are based on our view of the properties throughout the council, so the county. So we're working that out, but they're a very important partner in this.
That's good. Thank you, Director. I guess what I'm looking for eventually, because even though I spent a couple of stints on the Economic Development Committee of the City Council years ago, if you had to wait for me to understand everything in this thing, you would never be able to launch your program. I'm going to be honest about that, And so I have to have some faith in you that way. But nevertheless, there would be a time, when I would like to have, I would like to better understand, as I happen to be a temporary member of the land bank myself right now, and as of course Mr. Kelly is, and as the council has had quite a discussion about the land bank in recent months, and as we fund them to some extent, to some significant extent, to really understand, that relationship. I think it's going to be important to us being able to understand how this operates.
Thank you. Noted.
And to be as helpful as we might be able to be.
And I think during that process, that's why I believe a number of members of this council were saying that the land bank has to be an integration of economic development philosophies, so that they are not a standalone objective as far as the land bank sitting out there acquiring properties that they had desired to acquire versus acquiring properties that fit within a long-term strategic plan economically as far as the development is. And I think I agree with you 100%.
I do understand, and I've gotten that message from you real clearly. But I really do honestly believe that we're not very far away from that.
I agree 100%.
That understanding with the land bank in terms of their own idea of what they're trying to do. Obviously, they may be, focused on they are obviously focused on some emergency sort of measures in the inner city that are absolutely necessary, but they're not oblivious to what your point is.
Yeah, no, I think that the idea of these conversations are actually, I think, vectoring together very nicely as far as, at least it seems that way to me. And I think the same thing with, because I know that out in the President's District, there's a land bank issue, and it has significant fit within the same space as far as property that needs to be redeveloped. That's a massive project with well over 2 million square feet. Yes, Ms. Simon?
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure, and I'm sure most of this body understands, that the land bank does not always have discretion over what property they can require. There's individual contracts with different lenders which mandate purchases. So that's a different discussion for a different day. But as we talk about this and its relationship to this project, I just want to make, we probably have to explore that further, but there's not always discretion to just pick and choose which properties they're going to take.
Thank you. Any other questions in regards to it? Just a couple myself. I noticed this area does not have targeted industries identified within your section. Is that correct, Laura?
That is correct.
Okay, so the previous section did, and I believe the subsequent section will have targeted industries, but this section, as far as property, will not have targeted industries. Is there a requirement to identify an end user when you're going after product?
Okay, yeah, yes, for the building modernization program and for the site expansion program. For the redevelopment ready, we did recognize that sometimes we just need to have land available, and we have bifurcated that program to have a known end user and a non-known end user track.
Okay. And Mr. Fitzgerald, did you have a comment to it? I'm sorry.
Just very briefly responding to what Mr. Brady said. We had a discussion actually that just kind of popped up in the Board of Control today, and Mr. Jones and Councilman Miller was there. And we were talking a little bit, maybe it was on our minds because of the 60 Minutes piece last night, which I thought was a little simplistic, to be honest with you. I mean, it kind of dealt with the emotions of people going through foreclosure, but we had actually talked about this whole issue about if the county, at a retreat, we had a little staff retreat for directors and so forth, and we were talking about.
We're not allowed to do that.
I know, well,
I'm sorry.
and I'm not allowed to invite you. But we did not have pierogi pizza there. But anyway, but we had talked about kind of what we've gotten done this year and what were the big ideas for next year. And one of the issues that came up by a couple people was that we haven't really defined a big, ambitious vision for where we're headed with housing and all these housing issues. And the land bank's only part of it. And it's not just are they coordinating what they're doing now, but where do we want to get to, and what do we have to do to do that? And I think people are kind of looking for that. And if we don't do that, nobody else is going to do it, because I think it's beyond the power of any one city to do it, even though the city of Cleveland is doing all kinds of things. You know, that the report last night didn't really talk much about what the city of Cleveland is doing, but they're doing all kinds of demolition. They have their own land bank that people don't talk about a lot, but they have their own land bank process. But I don't think we've defined that. And we didn't talk about it, if you think about it, this year, except for these issues over, you know, how the land bank is governed, we didn't really talk that much this year about how we're dealing with land use issues. Now, we have programs like the one that Laura's been working on, which are a model, but we do have an opportunity, I think, to have kind of an overarching strategy, and I think we've got to define where we want to get to. And I am not a housing expert any more than you're an economic development expert, but what I want to say to you is that we're, as I said at Board of Control today, we're open to ideas on that. So I think in the first couple months of next year, we should try to figure out if we can set that as a major policy goal. I mean, one of the things I asked at the last VAPAC meeting that I was at, I kind of threw that out to them, and I said, how much more money would it take to not just try to keep ahead of things, but really transform things on the residential side? And they threw a number out, which was actually lower than the number I heard on 60 Minutes last night. But I think we need to talk about big issues like that, not to just kind of keep ahead of it, but what would it really take to address this thing fully from beginning to end? And I don't have an answer for that yet, but I've assigned my staff to start looking at it, and that's a dialogue I think we should have with the council also.
Yes, Mr. Brown?
You know, as Ms. Clark was talking about the competition of some of these outer counties being ready to go because it's green space, you know, the thought was occurring to me that on these brownfield cleanups, it seems like we're waiting for the project, you know, to come to us. I'm just wondering if we should be evaluating what is the best potential of a project so it's ready without somebody having to come. And maybe this is where the land bank can be used, so that we don't have to have the project yet, but get it ready so when the project comes, say, hey, here it is, right here, we have it.
No, and then to Ms. Simon's question, I believe, as far as selecting and picking, you had mentioned that the CIC is where the review process goes through currently. And
Right.
what happens if you, on the economic development, have recommended a project that you think is good, CIC says, nope, ain't gonna go? What's the procedural steps that we envision that's gonna take place? Because this is at least, your programs are up and running.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened, or have they ever rejected
Oh, yeah.
a program that you
Yes.
think was a good program? And
Yep.
what's our procedural step in this plan to give an appeal process to the CIC? Or is that the end of the process?
In the past, when I've had deals that were shut down by the CCCIC, you could either go back and rework the deal with the borrower, which was frankly a nice way to get your borrower to give you better security and collateral. Because you would just say to them, look, they're not going to pass this unless you give me what the program requires, the way that it's appropriately underwritten. So they're actually an effective tool that way if you need to flip a deal back on its head to get the borrower where you want them. And then you have a safe investment for the county. So you can bring it back. you can bring it back. Or you can, or, you know, your borrower may choose not to fight, they may choose not to bring it back. But in the past, I can tell you, if it was tabled by CCCIC, it did not
Mr.
come
Bennett would
before
like
the
to
county.
join you at the podium too. I think.
And in conclusion,
Yes.
Okay, so I get accused of asking questions that are tough, but all right, we'll leave you off the hook. We'll come back and revisit that. The appeals process is how we get that built in. I thought I was throwing you an easy one on that one, but I obviously was, because I thought yours was up and running on that one. So we'll pick up with the third major area, and Mr. Kelly, I know, has waited at bated breath to bring up where the big projects come into play.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 4 programs in the attraction and growth vertical, but we're going to talk today about large-scale attraction because it's the one that we're going to launch in January. We've already had kind of a soft launch with the talk of the $100 million fund. Now, one thing that I want to talk about is, first of all, Councilman Brady, this is a new program. But it is a growth of something that we already do very well. What Greg was talking about and what Laura was talking about, what they do is difficult. It is detail-oriented. They have to make sure that the borrowers are solvent. They're doing a lot of hand-holding, a lot of teaching, a lot of learning, a lot of back and forth. They also have significant volume. There's a lot of deals to be done, a lot to be vetted, and only a handful, the best, make it to council for final funding. So the process that Laura talked about in terms of property redevelopment, commercial property reutilization, is ostensibly the same process that we use in large-scale attraction, except the deals are more rare and the borrowers or users in large-scale attraction are established businesses with tremendous growth potential or sometimes relocating here in the Cleveland area. So the process that we use is one that you've already seen today. It's our standard process. The step that is critical is engaging with our partners. Now, those partners in terms of attraction come in many ways. It could be a company that's interested, that originates that interest on their own. That's rare. Oftentimes, it's with site selectors or realtors that are working on behalf of a company. And also, another opportunity is with Team NEO, which is a grant-funded business attraction organization that networks across the country and world to help build interest in Northeast Ohio. I know the critical piece of being an effective partner to these external partners is being responsive. And oftentimes that response comes with a cost. There needs to be incentive dollars to put on the table to generate interest from a business that's already established and can create jobs that are of significant enough scale to attract our attention, attract the attention of our partners, et cetera. Now, prior to the creation, the anticipated creation of the $100 million Economic Development Fund, the county did not have resources to put towards a potential attraction deal. So when Team NEO or another entity like the Ohio Department of Development had a lead, first, they didn't have one single site to go to say, here's a lead. So the county had to create that and then would email the potential lead to all of the economic development directors throughout the county. And then they get a whole lot of responses back of varying quality, dependability, unknown incentives, and certainly not the scale that we would be talking about in terms of large-scale attraction dollars. And the reason why is because cities, for the most part, don't have resources to put towards economic development that are of the scale that's going to get the attention of the jobs that we're talking about. So having the county as a role, not just as a point of contact, but also with the resources, allows us to be a strong partner in relocation. When there is a lead from an external partner, we can respond to it. They know where to go, and they know that they're going to get a reliable and reasonable response. It also allows us to work with our city partners who can also generate their own leads because of businesses that already exist to help those city partners have the scale to help them attract additional jobs. The process that we use is the one that Laura walked us through. We work with those partners. We discuss the opportunity. We discuss what resources we think that we have. We ask them to fill out an application. Department of Development makes that evaluation. We would go to loan committee, in this case, the Community Improvement Corporation. And then ultimately, any funding opportunity would have to be approved by the appropriate contracting authority. And the scale that we're talking about, I can't imagine a scenario they wouldn't come to county council because they'd be large numbers. We always tie those incentives, we will always tie those incentives to actual job creation. And then we'll have to evaluate, make sure that all of the loans that we put forward in terms of incentives have clawback provisions. They require the job creation, demonstrated job creation, and they don't get the benefits of the most favorable terms of the most favorable incentives until they've hit those targets and oftentimes maintain those targets. So I want to go through one that's been proposed already that you've read about, which is the AmTrust example. This is a tremendous win for the city of Cleveland, for Cuyahoga County. But the approach that we have initiated and will still have to continue with the county council is the one that Laura went through in pretty good detail. We are engaged with our partners. We had an opportunity that was brought to us by a site selector consultant, a company that had a presence here in the county, was looking to consolidate their operations that were in 22 different states, over 400,000 square feet in many different leases, but also we were competing against 2 other states where they also had a presence, where they owned buildings, and then also New York, where they were headquartered. We knew that through this opportunity, that if we put forward enough incentives and coordinated with the city and the state, that we'd be able to win this business. So we proposed something that we thought would be available in 2012, which are resources from the $100 million Economic Development Fund. I also made sure with the county executive that should the fund not be approved at that point, that we'll try to find some resources because of the scale of this attraction. And so we made them an offer. And we told them that we'd like to offer them a loan to help them move into the city of Cleveland and attract those jobs, more than 750 new jobs to the county with an average wage over $50,000 a year. Probably the biggest single jobs gain in terms of economic development success is my generation. So tremendous opportunity, but we're still not there. Even though the announcement has happened, we still need to get the requisite approvals and due diligence to be done to make sure that that loan is fundable. We need to have county council approval, but we do have AmTrust's commitment to make the move, understanding all the contingencies that are in place, which are presented to them up front. When those loans are made, they will have to meet the requirements of our loan, which has job creation requirements, investment requirements. They're committing to investing $20 million into a building downtown Cleveland, locating 1,000 jobs into downtown Cleveland. And then we'll be able to report that back both to our own committees that are doing evaluations for the funds, but then also to council as a success. So that is an example of how we do large-scale attraction. Now, I would also like to point out that large-scale attraction deals are exciting, but they're rare because moving is tumultuous. It's difficult to find these deals, and we have a lot of competition. But for the first time, we have the resources, anticipate having the resources, to be able to compete for these large-scale attraction deals, whereas this time last year, we had no resources to commit to even play the game. With any questions, I'd be happy to ask or answer those questions or refer back to Larry Benders to review our objectives moving forward.
And again, here we are referring to one of the 4 components within this area. You're going to come back and identify, for example, the workforce development areas and the other smaller business attraction pieces and things of that nature. as we start to unfold. Again, back to Mr. Brady's question about the new, and tell us when the new comes.
Mr. Chair, what we have additional benefit, not just informing council about these programs, but also with the programs that we plan to roll out. We need your help to engage our many partners and opportunities in your districts. So we will be back to talk about how all of our different programs will be administered as we continue to roll them out. And if you'll see on the launch plan, all of those programs and their anticipated launches coincide with council meeting dates so that we can make sure that we're partners in informing and improving those programs, not just as we launch them, but as we continue to improve them over the next handful of years.
And just for the benefit of the folks in the public, there is a spot on the agenda that says for other public comments. So if you wanted to do that, we don't know what you might have. I know we see some of our partners that have been named in here already, Jumpstart, Magnet, and things. I don't know if they have any desire to take and make any public comments, but please sign in regards to that when we get to that part of the agenda. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Germano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Kelly, under the job creation, I realize that a lot of these jobs are going to be transfer jobs. They're not new jobs. People moving from these other cities that this company is located in. Is there different criteria for new, fresh positions?
No. Oftentimes when there's a consolidation, when businesses are moving operations, you'll get a handful of the employees that were existing at the former site. You'll lose a handful too. So there are jobs that are open and become folks that are hired from the Cleveland County area. But the benefit of having a job is the same whether they are an imported job or a new job. So the criteria are the same.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, I have a general question for the director, if I might. Mr. Director, in terms of the county's overall economic development strategy, can you tell me how much weight we're giving to the Economic Development Fund and other incentive programs, and how much weight we're giving to efforts to try to improve the overall attractiveness of the business climate that would help create additional economic activity that would not be specifically tied to incentives?
Through the chairman to the councilperson, could you please explain what the overall economic climate of the county might be, so I may fully respond to your question?
Mr. Chairman, Director, it would be any improvements in the overall economic climate that you feel that would be conducive to attracting and keeping businesses in the county.
Thank you, sir. Through the chair, we gave considerable weight to the creation of the Economic Development Fund. We believe that, as the executive said, scale is essential. We have capacity to do some things, but not capacity to make a significant difference without a resource. So that's very, very important. And probably the most important thing is to have the resources to realize the strategy. And secondly, in order to improve the business climate, I believe the county can play a powerful role, as the plan said, in collaborating, identifying partners, creating the conditions for all these existing entities to work together against a common goal. And I think that will improve the overall climate and competitiveness of the businesses in our region if government is helpful, if the 501c3s are helpful, if they're coordinated, aligned, and not working against each other, and they're operating in an efficient and effective manner. And I think that's a question of leadership coming from the county, and I believe that is a very important part and a necessary precondition to improving the overall business climate in the county.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Just real briefly, I'm sure you can answer this as well as Mr. Kelly. There are no targeted industries within this, or are there targeted industries that we're going after as far as the business attraction?
In our economic development plan that was approved by the Economic Development Commission and ratified by County Council, we identify a number of target industries that are our growth industries. They include manufacturing, healthcare, advanced materials, et cetera. They're part of our economic development plan. Those are the ones that we target through outreach. However, when you have an opportunity for significant jobs numbers, even if they may be outside some of the target industries, they're ones that we would consider.
Okay. Only reason I ask that is because on your innovation form, you specifically have 5 categories identified, and I just want to make sure that we are more inclusive than that form would indicate out there, because it does not include some of the categories that we identified within the economic development plan, the 5-year plan. So I just want to make sure. I can understand sometimes innovation, maybe it's a little narrower, but as we move into these big job categories, I hope they follow the 5-year business plan we have in place. Thank you. And I think, Mr. Kelly, you also indicated that in the past, the leads kind of, when they fell on us, they got disseminated via the highly accurate technique of emails and whoever can respond, and that was not a good technique, at least as I understood that. Is that correct? Or that's how we did it in the past?
The issue is that we would have a partner that is tasked with business attraction for 16 counties. And it's very difficult. And then when that lead would be delivered to Cuyahoga County, our partner would receive up to 59 different responses of varying quality and distinction, or even eligibility in response to the lead. And so that wasn't a good way to manage a relationship, especially for qualified leads. That was a learning curve where the county worked with the cities to try to improve that process. Ultimately, the Greater Cleveland Partnership became a partner in that process to help distribute the leads. But having the county as the primary allows us to evaluate, and because part of our approach is not just taking the leads and distributing it back out to the cities, but already knowing, as we move forward with our collaboration with the different communities' economic development directors, already knowing where the priority locations are for those different cities, what inventory is available for existing sites or incentives that already exist at the cities, so that we don't have to wait for a response from unknown economic development director at City X. Instead, we already have that information. We're able to be responsive to those potential leads, those leads.
Just going back and focusing on, at least what I understand that you just said, was that the business attraction of the one-stop, the identified properties, the communities working together to bring forth the deal team, those were what you were focusing on as far as having the impact versus the old technique of 59 different responses.
Right.
Thank you. One of the areas that I didn't see is retail. And we're hearing from some of the communities that have blighted retail that perhaps we could go back and revisit, because I'm sure that a grocery store in downtown Cleveland would have a significant impact as far as an economic driver, and yet I don't see that as potentially a category, or it's a suspect category as far as retail. How does that fit into and where does it go? And is it something that we can come back and revisit, or is it, maybe I'm missing that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, this was a strategic decision on behalf of the plan and for the fund. Retail is critical for quality of life and presence in a city. The fund and the economic development plan are predicated on place-based economic development. So retail is critical to neighborhood development. However, the fund is targeted towards job growth. And significant jobs, people that are employed, drive retail. We have study upon study that demonstrates that we have too much retail inside the city. And so we have other funds that are available inside the Department of Development that can help revitalize existing retail facilities. Our storefront renovation program, for the first time, is funded with general fund dollars and CDBG dollars, so that we can use the right funding source for the right location. And just recently, and by the way, this was a program that was not funded in 2011. We're able to fund it ultimately this summer through making operations more efficient, making those funds available. And so you'll see in spring, countywide, a number of those applications to rehab existing retail. But we don't want to be using the $100 million Economic Development Fund to build new, probably unneeded retail where we already have a lot of retail in the county.
Is that a distinction that we could actually perhaps go back to, that building new retail, not good? Building and rehabbing retail is something that, I mean, because we have some dead malls here in the county, and they might need a piece of retail to go with it, but as I know, Council President knows that we've got a dead mall with over 200 million square feet sitting out there, that it's, perhaps it might need a piece of retail in order to revitalize that. So I only come back and ask if the administration would consider somehow defining that differently from new mall, new retail versus rehab in some of these areas that it might be critical to some of our communities, that is a distinction between those two.
I think that's a good point, Mr. Chair. I think we would agree on the kind of retail probably that we don't think it makes sense to subsidize. If somebody wants to build a new big box store out someplace, I don't think that makes sense for us to be rehabbing it. If somebody has a comprehensive plan to try to revive Randall Park Mall or something, that's different. And we do have some funds with storefront renovation and so forth that we've done with CDBG funds, as I think that's what Nate was talking about. But we could probably tweak that language there. So if there's something that's a transformative project that happens to have a retail component, I think that. But we had this discussion with the Economic Development Commission, and as a general principle, it wasn't thought that it was a great idea to invest in retail. But there could be exceptions to it. We want to be flexible for projects like the ones we just mentioned.
Right. That's all I was looking for. Is I think everybody says we probably we're retail new malled out, but by the same time, these dead malls that need to be renovated somehow. I don't know what.
Well, they may be renovated to a non-retail use, but they
very well
need
be,
to
yes,
have.
ultimately.
But the chances of them going from 100% retail, even if it's vacant, to 0% retail are probably pretty slim. I mean, there's always going to have to be some retail use to it.
Larry Benders, I would jump in and say it's retail for retail's sake doesn't make a lot of sense. But if it's part of a strategy, a place-based strategy that's going to make a difference in a community, in a neighborhood for some reason, then that's a project that we should be looking at, in my opinion.
And do you read this definition as potentially restricting that? That's all I'm trying to do is get to go back and revisit that definition so that we didn't eliminate a project base. Because I know a lot of my fellow colleagues here have communities that they could use project-based retail as a component to it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then I think last one of my colleagues brought up nonprofits, so to make sure that it's clear that a nonprofit would be eligible potentially to come in and go through the same process. You don't have to be a for-profit employer, I would hope.
Where job creation is key, nonprofit is an eligible use. Right now, as written, the property funds are not eligible for nonprofits because we don't see the return on investment through new property tax revenue. So that might be something that if there's a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, or a private property owner where the tenant is a nonprofit, I think that could be a consideration for that hurdle.
Yeah, because I think what's happening in our nonprofit sector is you're seeing some secondary employment starting to spread, so they're moving into areas that can be meaningful jobs for sometimes they're severely handicapped and people of that nature that would be a nonprofit, but yet they certainly are good jobs and they are certainly meaningful to our, I would not want to exclude them from consideration. Yeah,
something different before you adjourn for the evening. Not that you're about to or anything.
Yeah, we're close because I can feel the tension up here.
But you
I don't even look out the sides anymore at this point of the evening.
You'd said something a couple times that I think that the council members, but just for anybody, just for our fans at home or people that might be listening to this or watching this or covering this, I just want to make sure there wasn't any misunderstanding about it. The 11 separate investment areas that are listed under the entire fund. I know we talked about providing other details later, but I didn't want the impression to be left out there that, you know, you heard specifics on the 5 of them basically that we think are going to be, that we would like to launch at the beginning of January. And from my understanding of the request of the chair was that we wanted to provide actual documentation and about the way those, you know, the way the actual application documents, even the level of that detail. The other 6 are not general concepts that we have not defined. The council committee has been briefed on those before. And if there's council members, I know not all council members are, and I don't know who was present and who wasn't from the council, but I know not all council members are members of the committee, but the staff is available if somebody wants if somebody on the council wants a briefing on, for instance, under business growth attraction, if they want a briefing on what we're talking about doing for small business growth, incumbent worker training, accelerated growth, we can provide those details. Now, what we may not be able to provide, since some of them have to go through an RFP process, which wouldn't happen until March, we may not be able to give you exact documentation. Here's how you're going to apply. Here's who our external partners are going to be. But I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't the impression out there that for those that aren't being launched at the beginning of January, that they are kind of placeholders that haven't been defined. And I just wasn't sure that that was clear, because when you were talking about how details will be provided later, those are details of a pretty specific kind of application process and review process. But in terms of, does it make sense for a council as a whole to approve a $100 million fund for all of these purposes? I hope, and let us know if we haven't, I hope we've at least defined the purposes of those 11 categories. We may not have defined with complete specificity, you know, the external partners, the application process for those that aren't launching in January may not launch until March. But if you don't feel that you've been given enough specific information, let us know and we'll provide it again. Or if any council members feel they want an individual briefing about any of those 11 categories, the staff will be at your disposal.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. I think that's a perfect segue to go into that. I believe you have explained the ideas of the 11 major categories and the subcomponents. You have explained how it's going to get funded. We've gone through administration of 5 of the 11. We have not gotten the other. And so I can't speak for my colleagues as far as whether that's going to be sufficient definition. And so the segue will be the next meeting for the Economic Development Committee will be on the 3rd of January. And I will defer to everybody up here, because we do not want to have solicitation of times other than a public method here. I'm more than happy to change, and I appreciate my colleagues actually being willing to have the audience and our community come forth and be here for an evening meeting. I think I appreciate that, and I'm more than happy to do a 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I have cleared my calendar for that entire day, knowing full well that you were responding to my request, and I'm more than happy to, our usual time is 3 o'clock, but I'd be more than happy to do a morning. That's the Tuesday after we return from the holidays. Any preference? I'll be happy to defer and hearing nothing from anybody. Is 3 o'clock acceptable to everybody to have as a regular meeting? That gives you plenty of time to wake up from whatever New Year's Eve hangovers might still be lingering, and we'll go at 3 o'clock on the 3rd with that. And is there anybody that signed in for public comment for the additional piece of public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have 3. The first is Dana Myers.
Yeah, just please take the podium, say your name, and with the expectation that you're talking about economic development and not some other part of county business. Thank you.
Dana Myers, I guess my question would be...
You will be counted to 3 minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. To the director here, do you have a fund for a company that needs, say, in the $3 to $4 million range? That was my question.
If these are supposed to be public comments as opposed to, and afterwards we'll be more than happy to address and one-on-one.
Mr. Chairman, to the citizen, absolutely. We'll entertain applications, and we'll be happy to sit down with any company that wants to talk with us about what the eligibility for various programs are, what the requirements are, what the terms are. We'll be happy to talk to anybody about how we might be able to work together.
But that was your opportunity to use 2 minutes to give a commercial for your corporation, your business, or whatever you're going to do, but in the future. Thank you, yes. The next person want to address it?
Mr. Eric Johnson.
Ms. Johnson, if you please come up and put your name on the record, please.
Good evening. It's Eric Johnson. A couple of questions here. The first one, clarification about the loan review guidelines. Is there a printed or published document which covers the type of scoring or different parameters for a successful loan application for the microfund process? Also, with regard to the study about too much retail in the city, I'd like to get that information. And just in general, we as a county and all across the country, we're competing with fringe communities with regard to opportunities for getting improved economic development opportunities. One of the things that should be considered is a place like Seattle, where they have urban growth boundaries, where they have policy-driven reinvestment within the community. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about things that are forcing dollars back into the community. We're talking about $100 million here. What does $100 million look like turned over within the county 2 to 3 times? And that's the kind of focus I hope that we're taking in undertaking this process. I'm hoping to also hear more about a process that's people engaged. We had a presentation the other week about the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program that the state has. And these kind of processes that speak to more to people and to the opportunities that this money can play in the role of improving the quality of life of people that live in Cuyahoga County. We're talking about the land bank and the housing situation. You know, what happens when you say to a company that's bringing these people in, what happens when you look at the housing market and talk about what happens when we generate housing opportunities for your people and they live and work and pay taxes within Cuyahoga County? And I'm just hoping that, you know, in all this dialogue, that these people-driven concerns and that those policy concerns that drive money back into the community, and which we can do as far as government's concerned, as far as driving it back in through policy provisions. When you look at the application process, I looked in there and it talked about descriptions of jobs, but it didn't ask how many residents of Cuyahoga County you have in your workforce. And those are some viable questions we have to start asking people who want this money. And I'm just hoping that in the future, when we do these type of processes, that is job one, that policy drives investment dollars back into the community. If we're going to spend $100 million, how are we going to get $200 million for Cuyahoga County residents? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Madam Recorder?
The last one, I'm sorry, citizen meeting has to speak, is John Dearborn.
Dearborn?
Good evening. John Dearborn, the president of Jumpstart. It's been mentioned a couple times here this evening, but we're a nonprofit, a 501c3 that helps support innovative companies in Northeast Ohio through investing in those companies and supporting them with technical support, as Greg mentioned. We've now invested about $22 million in 60 companies. They've gone on to raise about $200 million in outside capital, of which about 80% of that has come from outside of Ohio, actually. So fresh capital coming in to help propel high-growth companies forward. And I bring that up because, one, about 52% of our deal flow has come from Cuyahoga County, even though we cover about 40% of the state. So this is becoming, statistically and otherwise, very much a hotbed of entrepreneurial activity. For a variety of reasons, not only because there's friendly capital, which is crucial to high growth entrepreneurship, but also because of the institutions that exist here and the intellectual property that's coming from those institutions and as a result of those institutions. And since we're promoting high tech and high growth businesses, that intellectual property, that intellectual capital is crucial. So I applaud the work that's been done here and it's being done to support innovation, to support entrepreneurship. It's a very critical component to any kind of economic recovery, as statistics from the past have shown. And so while all forms of economic development are good, certainly getting this entrepreneurial ecosystem kickstarted is a very, very crucial element. And the other thing I wanted to mention that we haven't talked a lot about this evening, but I think is also great from a timing standpoint, is there was a Third Frontier meeting today. And as many of you know, there's now well over $1 billion in support for innovation and entrepreneurship. And the timing of this is actually coinciding very nicely with what's happening with the Third Frontier. So the county's ability to leverage their dollars against what's happening there, I think, is also very good, as I said, from a timing standpoint. So I think that's one thing that will fit nicely into these plans as they move forward. And I'm not aware of any other part of the state that is taking such an aggressive stance in this area. So I think it stands that puts us in good shape for what's about to take place, and I think puts Northeast Ohio certainly in very good shape, because all of those dollars are competitively fought for, and I think this kind of aggressive move forward will be very positive for the county. So we're very supportive and appreciative of our partnership, and look forward to working with the folks here in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dearborn. Is there anyone else to sign in?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hearing nothing else, is there anything else to come before the committee? I appreciate everybody coming out this evening, and the pizza was not paid for by the county, by the way, so thank you very much. Call the meeting adjourned. Put that on the record.
Hey, Nikki. Peter. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, is that substantial?
It's been for my computer.
Oh.